Do you see it? Okay. Well, good evening. I have a question for you tonight, and that question is, how much do you really know about yourself? And I mean the good, the bad, and the ugly. And do you struggle to understand others as well as yourself? And how would you like to feel completely at home with yourself? Super comfortable in your own skin. This is the point of the Enneagram, to help us remember our true nature and to embrace all the parts of ourselves so we can function at our best. And my guest tonight is going to help us get clarity over the Enneagram, how to use it, and how deep it goes. First, I want to welcome you to Unstuck, the Road to Reinvention. I'm Lisa Miller, your host, and I am a reinvention life coach. I help women get unstuck from their lack of direction. They're trying to figure out where their passion is and how to find purpose and meaning in life. And I use some strategies to help with that. So if you are particularly empty nesting stage, I want to invite you over to reinventionlifecoach.com and check that out. I have a great video series for you there. And for those of you who want a more general introduction to my life coaching, just go to lisanellercoaching.com. Now, I'm going to introduce Erin Baute. And Erin has been studying and working in human behavior and behavior change for over 20 years. She has a background in human development and a graduate degree in public health, where she focused on social marketing initiatives and programs. She's currently working on her PhD in organizational psychology. Erin is a certified Enneagram teacher and trainer in an International Enneagram Association accredited professional. She was previously the director of health, education, and training for a for-profit direct sales marketing company and director of communications, marketing, and talent development for a national health system. She stepped down from both of those roles to better manage the needs of her daughter, who has special needs, and has been able to grow her own consulting company for the past 4 years. She provides business, strategy, communication, financial, and operational support to female entrepreneurs. Her current clients are therapists, small business owners, women franchising their business model, and other types of service providers. Now, Erin has used the Enneagram for the past 11 years, and in all of these capacities to help her navigate effective communication, team building, and business operations. She also supports the wellness services at Radical Wellness by providing Enneagram and business coaching to her clients as they work through a holistic approach to wellness in both a one-on-one and group setting. She's a wife and a mother of 2 littles, 3 and 5 years old, and they live just outside of Detroit, Michigan. I want to tell you real quick, I met Erin at a Thai restaurant in Phoenix, Arizona, because Erin is a really good friend of my daughter, Lauren, and they were in a PhD program together. And so they were having dinner at this Thai restaurant, and they kindly invited me. So I got to meet Erin in Phoenix, but she actually lives in the Detroit area. So welcome, Erin. I know it's late where you are, so I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm glad to be here. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Nice to see you and talk to you. So, okay, my first question for you is, would you say that you have gone through a reinvention of your own? And if so, I think our audience would love your story.
Well, I think, yes, absolutely. And I think probably more than one. And that's the beauty for me of the Enneagram, is that as I evolve, the tool evolves. So as I get to know myself and pay more attention to the complexities around my habits and my patterns, it shows new layers for me to shape within it. So my sort of founding story with the Enneagram I got married when I was really young, and that was not a good choice for me. And I was on the offset of that relationship and really struggling to know myself and find myself, and um, was introduced somewhat kismetly to the Enneagram through work. And it was really transformative because I was able to name parts of me that I had struggled with for 29 years that I didn't have language or the awareness to assign to. And so I used it in my own coaching, in my own therapy for many years before I decided to study it as an opportunity for me to teach or facilitate or guide. And even in doing that work, more layers, presented themselves. And I didn't necessarily have a path with what I wanted to do with it. I just wanted to integrate it into my whole life because it was so profound in my own journey of knowing, still to this day, knowing, right? It's not a finish line. I think was probably the hardest thing for me, is to realize that this doesn't end. Um, and so in the teaching and learning how to use it, I realized it literally was a thread that could go through life wherever we were, right? Like, so in the business context and team development and communication, it was effective. In relationships, it was effective. And understanding why new business owners get hung up financially, it just was so telling for me, and I just kind of let it unfold and still continue to let it unfold. So I'm probably on multiple iterations of my transformative journey at this point in my life.
Well, I love that you say that because I think we all have, those stages and phases in our lives where we shift and change, and we go through periods of growth and find ourselves to be like almost a whole completely different person, as far as the way we're thinking and behaving and stuff like that. I just want to say Lauren is there, and she says, "Hey, you see that? Hi, Erin. Hi, Lauren." Okay, so so before I get to this question, because I was going to ask you what type you identify with, but I'm going to wait on that one. And we'll cover that after you talk about this. So for those that don't know much about the Enneagram, can you give us a quick synopsis on what it is, how it is best used, and the reason to give it some serious consideration?
Sure. So the Enneagram, I think, is most succinctly described as a both spiritual and psychological growth tool. It's a tool in your tool belt that is meant to help guide, um, you know, evolution and knowing, and sort of the expansiveness that is self-awareness. I think it hooks really nicely to coaching work, to therapeutic work, to other sort of wellness work, because it just being aware isn't enough to experience transformation. We actually have to put that awareness into action and change behavior, right? And so I think it parallels really nicely with a lot of health services. And so in being a spiritual and psychological growth tool, it is meant to put language to subconscious and unconscious patterns of behavior. And these patterns of behavior are formed out of trauma responses in childhood. And I say trauma big T and trauma little t, right? Because as little kids, we don't really necessarily always know the difference of big impact like moving or the birth of a sibling, as well as some tougher scenarios like neglect or abuse, right? Our childhood brains know those things are hard, and we develop coping skills around them. And those coping skills help us modify behavior and meet expectations in our environment, and in turn into personality, right? Personality is just the mask with which we wear to help us feel safer in the world, and their learned experiences. And so the Enneagram puts language to that for a lot of us so that we know how to identify what has often, for lots of us, been unconscious, right? How do I know I do something if I can't see it? My favorite way to describe Enneagram work is picturing, and I know this isn't totally accurate in terms of, coronavirus, but if you can picture the last time you drove to work or drove somewhere that was, pretty habitual pattern for you, there's lots of times where we're driving and we get to our destination and we don't remember driving there because
Yeah.
it's so rooted in our subconscious that our mind can say, okay, I can do less work here. I know where we're going. I know how to do this. So let's reserve some of our energy. And that's true for our behavioral patterns. So our when we are in relationship for a long time, or we connect with people for a long time, and these are children, our spouses, we start to kind of go into this, rote response. We don't always see what's accurate and true behind what like maybe is intention, right? And so the Enneagram puts language to that so that we can start to know it and own it and work to show up more wholly in our day-to-day lives.
What a great explanation. I love that it's a way to put words to all these experiences that we're having and these subconscious thoughts and behaviors. That makes so much sense to me. So can you give us a brief synopsis of the 9 types?
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
there's 9 types to the Enneagram, main types, and then maybe focus on what it looks like for each type to move toward growth. We'll start there because I don't want you to have to cover too much because it's already a lot to do the 9 types. But go ahead. You can talk about this, how it might played to its strengths and everything.
Sure. So one of the things that I think is valuable if you're, thinking about dabbling in the Enneagram is that it evolves, because as I evolve, it evolves. So oftentimes when we enter into the Enneagram, we're looking at a primary type. So we might say, well, I identify as a type 7 or a type 9 or a type 1, right? It's my primary Enneagram type. And as we move through the work, we realize that I'm actually all 9 types. I just learned one of them. I got really good at the patterns in this one, but my real work is to expand into all 9 of them and to learn to access that. So as I get more aware, I also can expand the resources that I use. So the 9 types are 9 pretty distinct worldviews that come from a coping mechanism, some sort of core wounding. And within all 9 types, there are 3 distinct subtypes. And these subtypes line up with the sort of behavioral instincts that we learn in childhood based on where our brain development occurs. So we know these 3 instincts through the lens of fear, the lens of the 6, the type 6, because we understand fear responses fight, flight, or freeze. But that's just one worldview's reaction to these 3 instincts. When I take the other 8 worldviews and put them on the instincts, I now have 27 distinct Enneagram types. So I might identify as a type 7 and you might identify as a type 7, but our instincts could be different, which makes us really different types. So I say all that as a preface because we can sometimes get really boxed in by saying the type 1 is this, right? And so I try to unbox that a little bit. So I'll give you my big global explanation for each type, but no, there's a lot of nuance to all of this. So chronologically, the type 1 often gets labeled as the perfectionist. I find that term to be a little narrow. I think it only talks clearly about one of the subtypes. So I think thinking about the 1 in terms of reforming, improvement, striving to be better, striving to fill a void in terms of their own goodness by continuing to find ways to improve themselves. So I think that speaks more wholly to all 3 of the type 1s. The type 2 often gets called the giver or the helper, the nurturer. And I think thinking about them in terms of being strategic in their helping, there's a knownness in it, a sense of pride in my helping when I'm a 2, where I want to serve the other person so well that I know them better than they necessarily know themselves, right? So there's this greater sense of knowing in my giving. The type 3 often gets labeled as the doer or the achiever, right? And we can maybe when we only talk surface about the 3, we think of them as center stage, the CEOs, these big sort of achievers. And I think what can be really true for the global of the 3 is the desire to be good and to be seen as good, right? I want you to recognize my goodness. And the way I've learned to be good is by doing good things and being good at the things that I do. So I think that sometimes captures all of the type 3s a little more clearly. The 4 is our idealist and our creative. There is often a sense of lacking felt in a 4. They often feel ordinary, and so a desire to seek what is special and different and unique as a way to stand out, because there's often a felt that I'm too ordinary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The 5 is often called the sage, sometimes labeled as the introvert of the Enneagram, but introvert, extrovert is more of a state of consciousness. Any type can be introverted or extroverted. So I think more accurately, thinking about them in terms of avarice, the desire to hoard knowledge, the desire to hoard skills, to hoard their knowing as a sense of how I maintain security and my safeness, right? If I can control what I give to the world and my output, I can have enough reserves for the things I don't know that are coming, right? And then the 6 is sort of the fear response of the world. There are fear-based Enneagram type, and our warriors kind of run on anxiety and questioning and doubt. You can usually tell when someone's a 6 by when you ask a question, they answer it by asking a question, so just really seeking certainty. 7 is often called the adventurer or the epicure. And it's really somebody who's rooted in seeking experience as a way to lift out of painful situations. So by always kind of moving forward and hustling forward, I can lift out of pain and suffering and discomfort and conflict and kind of always move out of it. The 8s, sometimes 8s get a bad rap. They get, the defender or the challenger or the protector. And my master teacher was a type 8 and one of the most beautiful humans I've ever encountered. And her ability to be both strong and vulnerable, I think, was what is pretty amazing about the 8. Because oftentimes an 8's bigness in terms of protection and taking care of is a result of their own vulnerability. So oftentimes that defender, those defenders, those challengers, those big people who are willing to pick bold fights are often doing it because it didn't happen for them. And then our beautiful 9s, our peacemakers, our moderators, our mediators. I like the term peacekeeper because the 9 will so easily give themselves away for the greater good of group harmony, right? Whether that's the family unit or work or whatever community experience. If a 9 can kind of hit snooze on their own needs to make room for other people's needs, they will do that comfortably at their own sacrifice. So that's a really generic, really kind of glossy look at all 9 types. And what makes it really nuanced are those 3 subtypes. It also depends on my wing. So on either side of my type, where I'm adding sort of color and flavor to my behaviors, makes my type more dynamic. Where I move in the model, there's lines connected to the model, if you've seen it, that I move to those resources in times of stress and in times of health. And there's no limitation. When we use the low side of a type, the only way we find balance is by learning the high side of that same type. And so our work is to see where we are in terms of how I'm using the Enneagram and how I'm using type, and if I'm using high side or low side, so that I can start my wellness journey filling in other resources, the high side of, like when I started this work, I was realizing I was using a lot of the low side of type 1 as a coping. And so I really needed to learn the beauty of the high side of type 1 in order to find balance in it, right? To find those same skills. So it tells us all of these unique qualities about us. And then you add the final component, and that's level of consciousness. How aware am I, up or down, in this sort of spiral of my knowing? And that in turn makes the tool more or less effective based on what I know. So it becomes truly a map of my lifelong healing and growth and knowing. And I can start right here at my own sort of primary type, and I can keep growing out the more that I'm ready.
Like a weaving a tapestry. I like to use that metaphor for building that life. And then it is such a deep study. Like I can't even get over how much there is to learn and know about it. And then to even understand the levels of consciousness and all of that. I'm a type 9, or I identify as a type 9, right? I am the peacemaker and all that. I did a very 8 thing, last week, which is one of my wings. And I really feel like I lean more towards the 1 wing. But I posted this post on Facebook, and it says, "End racism now," which is like not something I do. And I found myself doing it, and I was like, whoa, that is just so not peacemaker, at least the type 9 type thing. It came from somewhere, and I just had to put it out there, and I did. But I realized it was a little bit of trying to connect to the 8 or something.
Yeah, get it, girl. Do it.
My husband's a 5, and he asked me tonight something about the Enneagram, and he totally botched the name. He can't even say Enneagram. But it has been so helpful for me to understand his tendencies as that dominant type. Really, after 33 years of marriage, almost 34 years of marriage, I'm still learning things about him. And I'm like, well, that's really cool that I can know that. So you mentioned did you mention your type?
I am a type 7. So what I tell people is that I fixate at type 7. So or I'll tell my girlfriends my 7's showing right now. Because when I'm sitting in 7, it's usually the most limited version of myself, right? It's the most narrow that I know how to behave and cope and be. When I lift out of that, I'm bringing in more of 1 and 4 and 8 and these other resources that help me be more whole. So I fixate at type 7. And so I'm a social dominant type 7 with a 6 wing. That's my, and so social is my dominant instinct. And it helps me understand that I use my 7-ness and my need for experience to belong, to feel like I belong to a community, I belong to my family, I belong to my friends, and I seek belonging as a way to feel safe.
I didn't prepare this question, but it just came to me like I cannot figure out my childhood wound. Is that like important to know, or is it just important to know that perhaps there was one and you may not even be conscious of it at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it might be hard for lots of people, especially if some of those experiences happen in the womb. You know, that there's not that is like an inherent knowing. That's part of your biology and DNA. It's not your conscious knowing. And then to be able to expect me to put meaning to something that happened to me when I was 4 years old in my almost 40-year-old body, right? That's probably not the work that I'm going to be doing. But what I can do is take my healthy adult self and reflect on and this is a lot of the work that I do in therapy, is reflect on the experiences of my childhood that form my knowing so that I can heal it and know it and, continue on my path of growing forward. So personally, I don't know that it's even possible for everybody to know what the experience might have been, just knowing that it originated there and that no wonder we get to a point in our life where the skills that we have are not enough anymore because I learned them when I was little. So, of course, my 7-year-old or 4-year-old or 2-year-old coping skills are not good enough for me as a mom or, a wife or, a daughter or whatever my role is.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so as someone is in the reinvention process, let's say they're changing careers, their kids have left home, they're starting a business, joining a nonprofit, going back to school. Like, what is good to know about your type, and how can it be helpful as you're transitioning?
Yeah, I think, I can definitely speak for me on this question. The more I've known about my type, the more it helps me know when I'm stuck, right? Like to be able to name, oh, this is why this is hard for me, or this is why I'm struggling I'm trying to get out of this too fast. That's usually my thing. I'm trying to get out of this too fast. It allows me to name and know my pattern and how that pattern is showing up when life is especially challenging. And traditionally, transition is hard, right? We say change is hard. Change isn't necessarily hard. We like the end result. It's the process of getting there that's usually what's hard for us, right? Like, oh, I want to lose weight and I feel better maybe in a stronger body, but it's the work of learning how to bring movement back in my life that might be hard. And so I think during transformation, when we can know and name what's real and what's hard, it gives us tools to keep taking those steps forward.
Yeah, that's good. And I think for me, as someone who has started a business and everything, I deal kind of with this inertia issue, trying to like the energy issue and just trying to move forward. And it takes a lot of energy for me to do what it would take nothing for someone who's more dominant in 3 to do. So I think it is good to know kind of a little bit about your energy level and the various nuances of the numbers so that you can be aware of those things and then be accepting of them. And,
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, I think that's the part of the Enneagram that has been the most helpful for me is grace. Grace for myself and grace for others, that I don't have to be like anybody else or move through my work or even find resources the same way. And that I get permission to do it in a way that honors who I am and what I need. And it's okay that my pace is slower or faster than somebody else's.
Yes, acceptance is key. So, how can we avoid using the Enneagram as a label? I know you touched on this earlier because you said there were so many nuances and there's actually 27 types and all of that. But how would you tell people to avoid using it in that way? Because that is their tendency. And they tend to skim the surface. Most people are like, oh, I'm this, and that's.
Mm-hmm. I think giving people permission to enter into tools and resources in the way that feel good to them And one thing I know is that the Enneagram is not for everyone, right? Some people truly want, a lightness out of it. They want the fun personality test, or to, listen to read memes and laugh about type, or to see which Disney princess they are, or whatever it is, right? Like, and I've had to, tame my inner beast throughout my journey to say, that's okay. That's okay. Because when somebody does step into it, when they're ready to use it as a lifelong tool, it's transformative. And I often equate Enneagram work to body work because we understand that culturally. We understand what it means to move and prioritize movement. And so I often think about the Enneagram as like, knowing your Enneagram type is like getting a gym membership. Um, and it's great. It's a really great first step, but we actually have to like show up and use it. And some people just buy a gym membership and never use it, right? Like, that's okay. That's okay. We still leave our doors open. We still accept you when you're ready to come in. And it's okay to step in and out of it. Where I personally draw the line ethically is when we use it as a weapon or a way to excuse harmful behavior, right? Oh, that's just me being blah, blah, blah. And that, I think, is in line with accountability and responsibility and, all in all, just being good humans to one another. So that's kind of where I say, okay, no, that's not comfortable for me, or, I don't want to engage in that. But if somebody isn't ready to really dig into the heavy lifting of it, just making space for them to enter when they are ready, if they ever are.
Yeah, so my daughter and she may have told you this, we had started an Enneagram book club for a while
Yeah.
and really had fun. It was a very small, intimate group, and we had a little fellowship sort of dinner together, and then we would go through the books. And it was really a fun way to learn. And then for sure, some people just kind of lost interest after a while. But she and I have not. So we're in it for the long haul, I think. um, do you embrace the idea of contemplative time, such as prayer, meditation, quiet time, to deepen the practice of studying the Enneagram and how we can connect to, on a deeper level, to God and ourselves?
I do. I think how I've sort of molded that throughout my life is realizing that contemplative time, that's a tough word tonight. Contemplative time really does look different based on different people. And so early on in my work, I might have been more quick to subscribe one way, do a journal, reflect, meditate, be still, be quiet. And that's the way in which we do the work. And then the more I've learned about myself, the more I've learned how different that is for me. I am not somebody who journals well. That is not how I process. I am a verbal processor, and I like to engage in really deep, thoughtful conversation in connection with my husband or my close girlfriends. And for me, I get significantly more out of those experiences than I would if I was just reflective journaling. And I can kind of pull apart and then sit in and chew on the things that we've uncovered. And so I do believe in deep knowing and deep work, and also the opportunity for folks to find what's meaningful for them, because there are lots of people that I work with who struggle with meditation. And so how do we help step them into successful behaviors that allow them time to process and think and feel and listen to instinct, that they will actually show up and do, instead of just, kind of resist against. So 100%, I think that work is deep and kind of down and knowing. And infinite in the way in which we can show up and do it.
Yeah, I love that. So, really, what works for you, right? Like the best way that you can process, and everybody processes and learns differently. Yeah, very good. So, okay, well, I personally believe that the Enneagram is worthy of exploring and studying as a tool for spiritual growth and personal development throughout your lifetime, for me anyway. So, how do you, Erin, personally help people understand the Enneagram, and what kind of things do you teach and workshops do you offer and that kind of thing?
A lot of the work that I do right now is Enneagram typing interviews to help people give really big picture clarity to behavior. And then some deep dive work so we understand what that is. And then I kind of package it in a way that they can take it into their therapeutic work with a therapist or mental health professional so that they can put it into action and practice in a way that helps them heal. So that's one of my favorite things I get to do with the Enneagram. And then I teach online groups to folks who want to do that work in community and with other individuals and want to do it over a longer period of time. That is my personal favorite work because I love to see the transformation happen. And I do that all through Radical Wellness, the virtual wellness platform that I work with. It's an amazing group of women. And then also, it's just great to see how it impacts team dynamics and businesses and how we show up. But I think one of the easiest ways to start in Enneagram work is to pick up a good book. And my favorite is The Complete Enneagram by Beatrice Chestnut. I think it's by far one of the best books on the market. She does a phenomenal job of breaking down each subtype to every type, a little bit about what the wounding or family environment might have been like to illuminate type and knowing. And it's just, I've had that book for 7-8 years and it never gets old, and I have yet to find one better. So if you're not sure where to start with the Enneagram, I would recommend that book as a place to start.
And it's called The Complete
Enneagram. And her name is Dr. Beatrice Chestnut.
Yes, I've heard of her, and it's on my list to get.
It's like a giant manual, and I almost use it like a reference guide. It's the perfect book to pick up and read the first chapter and read your type, and then read your spouse's type, and then your boss's type, and to kind of weave in and out in a way that serves you. I'm sure I've read it all, but not cover to cover. It was kind of the weaving through it. So it's really good.
Okay, well, where can people find you in Radical Wellness? Like, how can people get in touch with you to sign up for your classes?
If you visit us at radicalwellness.co, you can get a sense of the community of women and the work that we do and the groups and the offerings. We're pretty active on social media, on Instagram at radicalwellness_co. Lots of really great information there too from a team of really phenomenal women from lots of different specialties, therapy, body work, spiritual direction, the Enneagram, and how we intersect really nicely. So I'm super grateful to be a part of such a dynamic group of women and to do this kind of work.
That's so cool. And I will add that into the comments after we're done here. So thank you for that. Well, Erin, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. You are brilliant. And there's just so much stuffed up there.
I am definitely a head type. I'm definitely heady. Very nerdy, Lisa.
It's one of the things Lauren loves about you, and I so appreciate it as well. And I'm so grateful that you joined us here. I hope those of you out there who were listening, either during the broadcast or after the recorded version, I hope you got something out of this. Please leave your comments, questions, that kind of thing, because I will try to find answers for you if you have questions. We didn't have a lot of questions tonight, but Also, and now is as good a time as any to reinvent yourself. And if you are feeling stuck in life and you want to learn how to get unstuck and find more passion, purpose, and fun in your life, look me up at reinventionlifecoach.com. Get my free video series, and then you will be on your way to a holistic process for evolving yourself. So again, thank you to Erin for joining us, and you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks, Erin. Bye-bye. We'll talk soon, I hope.
Thanks.